Hey guys, tonight we're crawling straight into the dark heart of the Vietnam War. But not the jungle kind of dark, no. I'm talking about the kind of dark where even your shadow refuses to follow you, where the air stops moving and every breath feels borrowed. You're not flying in a Huey or hiding in the tree line. You're underground, hunched, and moving forward into the kind of silence that hums like it knows something you don't. Tonight, you're a tunnel rat. You've got a flashlight that works, sometimes. A .45 pistol that sounds like a cannon in enclosed spaces. And a knife you sharpened yourself because nobody in supply could issue you one small enough to matter. You've got your boots off because boots squeak. And you've got a job to do that nobody above ground wants. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, pull the blankets closer, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the lip of a hole no wider than a manhole cover. Behind you, the sun is hot, the jungle loud, and the rest of your squad looks away when your name's called. The tunnel entrance is just a shadow in the clay. The Vietnamese soil holds the heat like a clenched fist. You lower yourself in. There is no ladder. There is no ceremony. There is only down. Feet first. Arms held tight to your sides. Chest scraping wall. Rifle passed down to you in pieces. Because a full-size M16 is useless in a tunnel that barely fits your ribcage. The first 10 seconds are the hardest. The sun disappears. Your ears pop. Your breathing becomes louder than your thoughts. The only light you have is whatever your flickering flashlight decides to grant you. And the only guarantee is that whatever's ahead was built for someone smaller, faster, and more familiar with this place than you. Welcome to Vietnam's third battlefield. Not the air, not the jungle, but the soil itself. You crawl forward, slowly. You're sweating from your eyebrows. Every few feet, you pause, flashlight off, to listen. But the tunnel is alive. Not noisy, alive. You hear drips, scratches, the distant echo of your own shift in weight bouncing off bends ahead. Your hand brushes something smooth, too smooth. You freeze. Move your light. It's a string, tied taut, booby trap. You stop breathing for a full 5 seconds, and then cut it carefully, tracing it with your fingertips to the wall where a small canister waits. An old grenade? Maybe. Or a homemade mix of something worse. Viet Cong ingenuity was frightening, not flashy. There's a reason you're alone. It's not just because the tunnels are small. That's what they tell the brass. But it's more than that. 2 people make noise. 2 people knock elbows, step on traps, get each other killed. This job, this crawling, whisper-breathing, dirt-smelling job, requires one person who knows fear well enough to keep moving anyway. You reach a fork in the tunnel. One way slopes slightly upward, the other down. No markers, no signage. You flip a coin in your head. You go down. Your shoulder grazes something hanging. You yank back, hard in your throat. Flashlight on, just for a second. It's cloth. A canteen. Still full. Still warm. Someone was just here. You pull your sidearm slowly from its holster. Down here, your .45 is like thunder. If you fire it, you might rupture your own eardrums. But if you don't, the guy who left that canteen might wrap piano wire around your throat. Your hand is shaking. They never put that part in the recruiting posters. There's no glory in being a tunnel rat. No medals anyone really wants to hand out. You're not even supposed to exist. The job was unofficial, a role invented in desperation. When the U.S. Army realized the Viet Cong weren't just hiding in jungle underbrush, but living under the feet of American patrols, something had to be done. And it wasn't going to be done by the guys with radios on their backs. So they found you. Small, skinny, quiet, maybe a little reckless. Maybe just enough to say yes when someone asked, "Hey, want to go down there and poke around with a flashlight and pistol?" That's the joke, right? Flashlight, pistol, and a prayer. Sometimes you even had a mirror. just a dental one, tied to a wire for checking corners. But mostly you trusted your gut. And your gut is telling you now that this tunnel is changing. The walls are getting slicker, lined with bamboo slats. Reinforced. That means the tunnel is used often. You pause. Listen again. A soft shuffle ahead. Was it your imagination? You kill your light. Hold your breath. Nothing. And then, yes, something. A breath that isn't yours. You inch forward, pistol raised. The air is thick now, hot as breath from a furnace. The tunnel curves left. Then again, you lose all sense of direction. Is up still up? You don't know. The clay smothers your sense of time. A bat shrieks. You nearly fire. Your ears ring from the near shot. And that's when you see it, etched into the clay wall. A mark. A symbol. It's not military. It looks older, almost tribal, scratched into the tunnel with care. Historians still argue whether the Viet Cong incorporated old religious symbols into their tunnels to confuse or frighten American soldiers, or whether this one just belonged to an older structure repurposed by necessity. You touch the symbol. It's warm, maybe from the air, maybe not. You feel foolish for doing it. You move on. Eventually, the tunnel opens slightly. A small chamber, just big enough for two. There's a mat, a lantern, some food wrappers, and a scent. Cigarette smoke. Faint but real. You're not alone. But no one's here now. You backtrack. Quiet as thought. You reach the original fork. This time, you go up. At the top of the incline is a hatch. Wooden. Light filters through the cracks. You press your ear against it. Voices. Distant. Vietnamese. Laughter. You're under a hut. Maybe a field station. Maybe a family home. You don't know. But you mark the spot mentally. This is intelligence. This is what they want. You turn and make the long crawl back. Every scrape of elbow against wall feels louder. Every shift of air behind you feels like a breath, not your own. You make it back to the surface, blinking, covered in sweat and clay. You look at the sun like it's something new. You feel the wind on your face and realize it's the first time you've felt air in what could be an hour or a lifetime. No one claps. No one cheers. Someone hands you a canteen. You drink. It tastes like metal and salt. You go sit alone, because how do you explain to anyone what you saw in the dark? You're not even fully out of the dirt yet when you hear behind you. Thunk. The cover on the tunnel mouth closes like a coffin lid. One of the engineers, grinning nervously, drops a sandbag over it. For safety, of course. You sit in the sun, blinking. The world above is too big now. Too loud. Too bright. Your skin itches where the clay touched it. There's a ringing in your ears. Not from noise, but from silence. That compact, echo-free kind of silence only a few humans have ever known. You're back on the surface, but the tunnel hasn't left you. A sergeant walks over. He looks like he wants to say good job, but doesn't. Instead, he hands you a folded notepad. You're supposed to draw a diagram. Everything you remember. Length, depth, trap placements, oxygen pockets, markings, slope of the walls, smells. You do it automatically now. Memory works differently after you've spent an hour listening to your own lungs as they whisper the difference between life and death. You mark the split, the slope, the bamboo lining, the hatch. You pause at the symbol. What do you write? Weird graffiti. Old carving. Definitely haunted. You settle for unknown symbol. Wall near chamber. Appears pre-war. Likely spiritual. No one will read that. Not really. But you remember. Now the day stretches forward, heavy and loud. You're back with your unit. They ask, what was it like? You shake your head. One of them jokes, but it smelled like Grandma's root cellar. You grin on the outside. On the inside, you're still holding your breath. Later that week, command assigns you again. Different village. New hole. This one's just outside of Saigon. What they didn't tell you, and maybe didn't even know, is that beneath Saigon, a whole other war is unfolding. One few officers really understood. The Siuchi tunnels. You've heard the name whispered, like a campfire tale with teeth. Over 200 kilometers of interconnected tunnel, some stretching under roads, rivers, even U.S. bases. It's not just hideouts. It's living quarters, hospitals, armories, kitchens, schools. Entire battalions disappear into the soil like ghosts. The Viet Cong don't just use the tunnels, they live in them. The first few meters are always the same. Tight, hot, choking on dust and fear. But this time, something's different. You notice it quickly. These tunnels feel planned. Not like makeshift rabbit holes, but structured, deliberate. You reach a section where the walls have support beams. Bamboo, reinforced, angled for weight distribution. You're not just crawling through a tunnel. You're inside someone's architecture. And every bend, every trap, every pocket of air has meaning. You pass a kitchen vent. You only notice it because the air tastes warm. Smells faintly of garlic and fish paste. The Viet Cong built stoves with vent stacks that cooled smoke before it reached the surface, an invisible exhale. The U.S. tried to spot these vents from helicopters, but they were never in the same place twice. Smart, quiet, ancient ingenuity in a modern war. Another few feet, and your hand brushes something hanging from the ceiling. You flinch, then exhale. A bat, sleeping. Dozens of them, clinging to the ceiling, upside down, silent and still. Except for one, who opens its eyes as you pass, like it knows. There's something oddly comforting about the bats. They belong here. You're the intruder. You press on. The tunnel narrows again. A squeeze section. You flatten yourself, arms stretched in front, pistol holstered. Nothing moves. You breathe through your teeth. You finally break through to a slightly wider chamber. You freeze. A table, paper, a lantern, no people, and yet warm. You scan quickly. A radio in the corner. Old Soviet model. You've seen it before. You know what it means. This isn't a random shelter. This is a command node, an intel center, and you're alone in it. You debate, photograph it or plant charges. You were told to scout, not engage. But if you don't destroy it, someone will use it again. If you do destroy it, someone might come back while you're still inside. Your call. You plant a thermite packet. Set a delay. And now, you need to move. Fast. The tunnel seems smaller now. The walls feel closer. The silence gets interrupted. Not by noise, but the absence of it. That's the thing about being in the earth. You don't hear footsteps. You feel them. The vibrations move through clay like rumors through barracks. Someone is behind you. You crawl faster. Take a wrong turn. Dead end. You curse under your breath. Backtrack. Another turn. Then you see it. A smooth shaft going almost straight up. Handholds carved into the clay like a ladder. This isn't an exit. It's a chimney. An emergency escape. You hesitate. Do you climb or risk the known path back? You go up. Each step is murder on your thighs. You're slick with sweat. Clay gets under your fingernails, in your eyes. You bite your lip to keep from grunting. At the top, light. You push open the hatch with your back. Jungle. You're meters from where you entered. The thermite goes off below. A soft whomp, muffled by earth. The jungle birds scatter. Nothing burns like thermite. Back at base, they debrief you. You try to explain what you saw. The layout. The structure. The feeling that you were crawling through something ancient. Not just tactical, but cultural. A living, breathing organism of clay and memory. One officer asks if you think the tunnels are more than just hiding places. You say yes. He nods, writes nothing down. And still the question haunts you. How could they have built something so vast, so complex, underfoot, with no one noticing? Well, that's the thing. The Vietnamese have been digging for centuries. During the French occupation, during the Japanese invasion, and long before that. Tunnel systems weren't an innovation of the 1960s. They were a continuation of a strategy as old as the soil. Historians still argue whether the French truly understood the scope of early Viet Minh tunnels. Some say colonial engineers found entrances and sealed them. Others claim they ignored them entirely, believing no peasant could outwit modern empire. And so it fell to you, a farm kid from Missouri, or a scrappy Brooklyn brawler, or a California surfer with no surfboard in sight, to crawl through the forgotten catacombs of resistance and figure out what modern war forgot. You're not a soldier anymore. You're an archaeologist in real time. And everything you touch down, there is history still being written in damp clay. You're lying flat again. This time it's a newer tunnel, wider by maybe an inch, which might as well be a ballroom in this world. Your elbows no longer scrape the walls with every shift. A gift, sure, but also a warning. If it's this easy for you to move, it's just as easy for someone else. You remember what one of the South Vietnamese ARVN guides told you at briefing. The ones who survive are the ones who stop trusting their eyes. At the time, it sounded like mysticism. But now, crawling forward with your flashlight turned off, you realize it's tactical doctrine. Sight lies. Eyes adapt too slowly. But ears betray truth. Skin tells you stories that light never could. You're trained now to listen for the silence changing. Not noise, just the difference. You pause, holding your body still like a corpse in clay. There's a sound, not ahead, not behind, but within the walls. Something faint, not rats, not bats, something bigger. You reach for the wall with both hands and press. It's warm, too warm. Then the wall moves. No shifts. Air. A hidden vent. A pocket. No. This is a door. You slide back. Grip your .45. Exhale slow. A quick flick of the flashlight. 1 second only. Wooden outline. Clay-blended hinges. You never would have seen it otherwise. You're facing a concealed side tunnel. No trap. No marking. Just a passage no one expected you to find. You don't have to enter. But you do, because that's who you are now. The air shifts immediately. Cooler. You follow your gut. This tunnel slopes downward. The walls are slicker. And the smell? Wet earth, but sharper. Metallic. Like rusted tin mixed with something older. Familiar. Blood? You push forward, belly down now, flashlight off, only flicking it on when absolutely necessary. And that's when you reach it. A carved arch. Just clay, but shaped deliberately. Not Viet Cong, not modern. The work looks aged, ancient even. The walls beyond are darker in color, baked differently, as if part of another system entirely. You crawl through, and it opens. A chamber, man-sized. Your light sweeps across the room, slowly, deliberately. Bones, not human. Pig maybe, goat. Scattered intentionally, arranged in circles. You don't need to be a religious scholar to know ritual when you see it. In the center of the room, a small stone statue, buried halfway in dirt, carved from dark green stone, weathered beyond recognition. It doesn't look Vietnamese. It doesn't look like anything you've seen before. You reach toward it, then pause. You check the floor. Good call. Thin bamboo spikes encircle the statue like a wreath. No pressure plate, no wire, just sharp, poison warnings for anyone who gets too curious. The flashlight flickers, dies. You slap it once, twice. It returns, barely. You move backward, slowly, respectfully, because suddenly, this doesn't feel like war anymore. It feels like trespassing. Outside the chamber, you mark the wall with a scratch. You're the first American to see this place. Maybe the only one who ever will. You won't report this. Not exactly. Not everything. Back in the main tunnel, you move faster. Your muscles are screaming. Your knees feel like bruised fruit. But your heart won't stop hammering. Not from fear this time, but from awe. You reach a vertical shaft. Another exit. You climb. Claw. Scramble. You pop out in the underbrush, just north of the last patrol marker. You wipe your face and start laughing, because no one's going to believe a word of this. You make it back to the firebase just before dusk. You're met with the usual nods. The way grunts acknowledge each other without admitting the war is swallowing everyone whole. One of the engineers asks, "Find anything weird?" You think for a moment. "Nope," you say, and walk on. Later that night, you're given another assignment. Same province, different hamlet. The intelligence guys are convinced that each tunnel you map brings them closer to shutting down the CUC network. You don't tell them that it's not a network. It's a world. And every tunnel is just one thread in a tapestry, so vast and quiet it hums like a language. You sleep for 2 hours, maybe 3. When you dream, it's not about firefights or ambushes anymore. It's the statue, in the dark, watching you. Next morning, new tunnel, different soil texture, sandier, lighter color. The engineer warns you. This one's loose. Collapse risk. You shrug. You go anyway. Because by now, you know the truth. The tunnel doesn't kill you. You do. If you panic. If you shout. If you rush. It waits for mistakes. This time, as you crawl, you recite jokes to yourself. Out loud. Stupid ones. Like 2 grunts walk into a bar. The second should have ducked. Or, you know you're a tunnel rat when daylight feels like an ambush. The laughter keeps your brain busy. You don't think about what's behind you. You don't think about the spider that just skittered over your neck. You think about the job. This tunnel is newer, less smooth by use. You scrape your shins. You eat clay. You move by instinct. At one bend, you find a sack. You poke it. Not a mine. You pull it open. Documents. Rice paper maps. This is gold. You take pictures with a little Polaroid camera duct taped to your chest. The brass will drool over this. But all you can think is, why did they leave this here? So exposed. So obvious. You skin the walls again. And that's when you hear it. A whisper. You freeze. Not speech. Not breath. Not wind. Just a voice without shape. Maybe a bat. Maybe your own blood pressure. Maybe nothing. Or maybe the tunnel just doesn't want you here anymore. Later, when you finally emerge, arms shaking, face pale, you say nothing. You hand over the photos. You draw another diagram. You clean your gear. But you don't shower. Not yet. Because part of you still feels buried. As if, somehow, you never really left. You wake up in a tent that smells like boot polish, diesel, and someone else's sweat. It's dark. Not tunnel dark, but enough that for a moment, you wonder if you're still underground. You blink hard. The canvas above you comes into focus. Night air presses in from outside. Crickets chirp like a ticking clock. You're not on patrol, not on rotation, not assigned to a search and destroy. Just waiting, which means they're about to send you back under. In the mess tent that morning, no one looks at you directly. Not out of disrespect, more like superstition. You're one of them. The tunnel rats. The creatures that crawl where no man was meant to crawl. It's not quite heroism. It's not quite madness. But it lives somewhere in between. There's coffee. Barely. It tastes like rust and smoke. You drink it anyway. Command hands you your next assignment on a clipboard. Handwritten, even though typewriters are everywhere. You scan it. Bend Cat Province. Clay tunnels. Suspected enemy HQ. Heavy vegetation. Booby traps likely. Go alone. You sigh through your nose. No questions asked. No thanks given. They issue you the usual gear. Flashlight. .45 pistol. 2 spare mags. Wire cutter. Small hand mirror. Chocolate bar. Half melted. Map that's wrong in at least 5 ways. And for the first time, they give you a gas mask. You raise an eyebrow. Gas. The tech shrugs. Rumors. Some guys say the VC are trying tear gas underground. Just in case. Just in case. Nice. You helicopter in low. Dust kicks up in your teeth. The jungle parts around you like an angry god brushing away flies. 2 ERVN scouts lead you to the site. There's a half-collapsed hut with bamboo poles sticking up like broken ribs. One of them points to a crater behind it. Tunnel here, he says. Already cleared of traps. First 20 feet. You nod, which means nothing. The opening is bigger than expected. dug hastily, maybe by the VC in retreat. You slide in, feet first. It's cold, not cool. Cold, like a breath drawn from deep within the mountain's mouth. You feel it immediately. The pressure, the change. The jungle is loud. Cicadas, birds, whine through trees. But down here, the silence is mass. It settles on your chest like a heavy hand. The walls are wet. This tunnel is deeper than most. You crawl forward, pistol out, breathing shallow. Within 15 feet, you spot your first surprise. A pair of sandals, neatly placed facing the wall. A small bowl of rice. A candle stub, not military. A shrine. You blink. Offerings for the dead, or maybe for protection. You've read the briefings. How some Viet Cong believed in ancestor spirits, even in war zones. Historians still argue whether these personal shrines were widespread underground or isolated to specific regions. Some veterans claim they saw dozens. Others, none. You leave it undisturbed. You press on. 50 feet in, your flashlight beam catches something odd. A glint. You flick it back. A watch, still ticking, strapped to a skeletal wrist. You freeze. It's American. You reach forward carefully and spot the name etched in the band. H. McBride. Dog tags, still around the neck. No blood. No signs of violence. Just a body curled on its side, as if asleep. Tunnel collapse? You take out your notepad. Write the name. Draw the position. You whisper, "I see you, McBride," without even realizing you've done it. Then you move on, because staying still is a kind of death. Deeper still, the clay changes color. You start to see signs of layered excavation. Old tunnels repurposed, reinforced, expanded. You pass a section where the roof has collapsed partially, then shored up with planks. The air smells stale here. Not rot, just old. And then, suddenly you feel it. Your heartbeat. It's not fear. It's recognition. You're in a section of tunnel you've been in before. Not this exact one, but the layout, the incline, the dimensions, almost identical. There's a pattern. It hits you like a whisper between the ribs. These tunnels aren't random. You flash back to something you heard over mess hall coffee. Some young corporal claiming that VC tunnel networks followed rules of symmetry. Like sacred geometry. Like ritual. At the time, you'd rolled your eyes. Now, you're not so sure. You stop a side chamber. It smells like smoke, charcoal, and something sharper. Inside, you find a low shelf lined with tiny jars, glass, clay, even a Coke bottle reused for something else. Each contains some mixture, powder, ash, dried leaves, bone fragments. You don't touch them. Next to it, a blackened photo, face burned out, uniform still visible. You don't recognize it. Could be VC. Could be French. Could be someone long before either. This chamber feels dedicated. Like someone meant it to be remembered. But remembered by whom? You back out. Slowly. Respectfully. And that's when your flashlight dies. Not flickers. Dies. No panic. You sit in the dark. Breathe. You run your hand across the floor, tracing your path backward. Your fingers find something cool. A wire? No. A string. A trap. You stop moving. Heart racing. You reach up, carefully trace the line. It disappears into a clay groove above. You cut it, slowly, with your knife. Pull it toward you. Attached to the end, a tiny brass bell. A warning system. You freeze again, because that means someone knows you're here. Or did at one time. You press your ear to the wall. Nothing. Then faint. So faint. A breath. Not yours. You scramble backward. Not fast. Just fast enough. You count your movements. 1 elbow. 1 knee. 1 inch. No sound. No panic. Finally, you reach a split and turn up a tunnel you hope leads to the surface. It's a gamble, but so is breathing down here. You see daylight. It feels like grace. When you emerge, you're soaked. Not in sweat. In something colder. Fear, maybe. History, maybe. A medic checks you briefly. You say, found a body. McBride. Watch still ticking. They scribble it down. No one asks what else you saw. Which is good, because how would you even start to explain it? That night, you sit under mosquito netting, holding your flashlight. You change the batteries, clean the lens, but something inside you knows. The dark isn't empty. Not here. Not ever again. You tighten your grip on the M1911 pistol again. It's a strange comfort. Short, heavy, stupidly loud for a tunnel this size. But it's what most tunnel rats carry. That, a flashlight with red lens tape, a knife or two, and sometimes a string to mark your way back. All of it strapped tight so nothing dangles or clinks. You don't want the enemy hearing your heartbeat, let alone your kit. Now you're deeper underground. The smell changes. Less damp, more smoke. Burnt something. Gunpowder, maybe. You can't be sure. The air is thicker, like it's been breathed in and out too many times. You crouch lower, then drop to your stomach and start crawling forward inch by inch. This section of the tunnel is barely wider than your shoulders. Sometimes you wonder why you volunteered for this. Maybe you didn't. Maybe your small frame and claustrophobia immunity gave others ideas. Either way, here you are, belly crawling through the Viet Cong's veins. You feel the dirt shift under your knees. A root brushes your cheek. There's something wet on your elbow. Best not to think about it. You pause at a small opening, another side chamber. You peek in with the flashlight. Just a crate. Canned food. Some rice. A pack of old French cigarettes with faded colonial lettering. And a child's sandal, no bigger than your hand. Why it's there, alone, no matching pair, no one knows. Historians still argue whether tunnels doubled as family shelters in combat zones. Some say it was only elite guerrilla units down here. Others found toothbrushes and family photos and dolls. You keep moving. Then you hit a dead end. But it's not natural. There's a board covering something. You press your ear to it. Silence. You pry it loose gently. It creaks once, and your stomach folds in on itself. No movement. You slide through, and suddenly, it opens into a small underground room. Not a bunker. A room, with walls of clay, smoothed by hand. Bamboo slats line the floor. There's a flickering candle in the corner, and across the room, a pile of documents. A ham radio, a uniform jacket, a pair of slippers, still warm, and no one in sight. That's worse than finding someone. You freeze. One breath. Two. The candle flickers again. Was that a shadow? Then a crack. Not loud, just a shift. Clay settling, or something moving behind that curtain of vines strung up like a false wall. You retreat. Slowly. Every inch backward takes a year. You retrace your crawl with a string tied to your belt. The one you anchored at the last junction. You follow it like it's a lifeline. Which, let's be honest, it is. Because there's a rule you follow down here, even if it's unwritten. If a tunnel doesn't want to be explored, don't push your luck. The VC were masters of psychological warfare. They left rooms looking too quiet on purpose, or designed exits that led into pits, or buried jars of honey laced with rotting meat to attract swarms of red jungle ants. Sometimes even snakes, trapped and angry. One tunnel rat swore he found a shrine down here, candles still lit, with fresh fruit and bones of a pig laid out. A ceremonial offering to ancestors or spirits of the tunnel. Nobody laughed at him. Not after he came back with his hair singed off and his shirt soaked in pig's blood. You don't find that story in textbooks, but it spreads among the rats. They call it the curse of the ancestor shrine. Quirky? Maybe. But in a war where tunnels defy logic, some start believing that the dirt itself remembers, that the walls whisper, that the VC weren't the only things you should fear down here. Your crawl back up feels endless. You want to stand, to breathe, to scream, but you don't. You just inch upward, one boot push at a time. Every sound you make echoes back, multiplied. You check your string again, still taut, still leading out. Then your light flickers. Batteries again. You slap the flashlight and it steadies, but your heart doesn't. Finally, you reach a shaft. You ascend, feeling every rung of the bamboo ladder vibrate. You pop your head up into daylight, or rather, dappled light filtered through jungle canopy. You're back. Your lungs drag in the air greedily. Your heart's still racing, but that's expected. You squint at the sun. Was it really just half an hour? It felt like days. A sergeant waits nearby, notebook in hand. He barely looks up as you stumble out. Find anything? You shrug. A radio, some papers, and a warm candle. He jots it down like it's a grocery list. No reaction. He doesn't ask about the child's sandal, or the fresh slippers, or the shadow behind the curtain. No one does. Because that's the job. You go down, you come up. You don't always know what you saw. You just write it up, clean your gear, and maybe joke with the other rats about whether the tunnel will let you back in next time. And you hope there's a next time. Because the only thing worse than being asked to go down again is being replaced. They say the tunnels are alive, that they choose who makes it back. You're starting to believe them. A glimpse of the enemy. You crawl forward again, belly scraping the dirt, but this time with a different kind of tension wrapping around your ribs. Not the fear of booby traps, though that never quite leaves you, but the creeping certainty that something ahead is alive. You've heard it said before, often in whispers behind the mess tent. Sometimes the tunnels don't stay quiet. Sometimes they breathe back. Your flashlight beam twitches as your hand shakes. The shadows curl and lurch. You pause. Was that movement? A rat? A snake? A person? You squint into the dark and catch it. A boot print. Not yours. Fresh, still damp in the clay. It leads into a fork ahead, and even though every hair on your arm screams to turn around, you press on. After all, if you don't, who will? Tunnel warfare in Vietnam was never just tactical. It was psychological. You weren't fighting structures. You were fighting silence. Fighting a mind that had prepared these places for years before you ever set foot in them. These tunnels weren't slapdash ditches. They were cities beneath the jungle, with their own logic and language. And when you saw signs of the enemy, scraps of cigarette butts, a half-eaten can of rice, a sandal print, you understood something chilling. Someone else had just been here. Probably still was. There's no room to fire your M1911 in here. That's why many tunnel rats learn to carry knives, small revolvers, or sometimes nothing but their fists. Quiet was everything. Sound could kill. And when you finally see him, yes, him, it's less dramatic than you'd expect. A flicker of a face down the corridor, darting like a lizard. Gone again. But you saw him, and he saw you. You freeze. You wait. You listen. No gunfire. No shouting. Just breathing. Yours and maybe his. And maybe you imagine it. Or maybe you don't. A whisper in a language you don't speak. Then nothing. Historians still argue whether tunnel encounters led to actual engagements or were mostly fleeting, shadowy standoffs. The North Vietnamese strategy relied heavily on these underground spaces not just for protection, but for confusion. They didn't have to fight you down here. They just had to make sure you never felt alone. And now you understand why. Because nothing unravels a person like the slow, uncertain certainty of being watched in the dark. You push forward because the tunnel doesn't give you any other option. You check corners, glance behind you. Your mouth tastes like rust. Here's a fringe tidbit you probably didn't learn in school. Some American tunnel rats began leaving cryptic chalk marks behind. X's, symbols, short phrases, partially to guide themselves back, and partially to taunt or terrify the enemy. One infamous rat in Siuchi was known for scratching guess again near trapdoors. A little petty, maybe, but when you're inching through darkness with nothing but your heartbeat and flashlight to keep you company, psychological warfare starts looking like self-preservation. And speaking of self-preservation, you pause again. There, on the wall, a crude drawing, etched into the clay. A stick figure, holding a gun, a head with spiky hair. Beneath it, in shaky Vietnamese. We see you. Great. Perfect. That's not unsettling at all. The tunnels aren't just spaces. They're messages. Communications channels between those who dig and those who dare to enter. Every smell, every noise, every footprint. Each one is a sentence in a language of survival, and you're still learning the grammar. Eventually, you reach a widened chamber. Storage maybe, or a meeting point. It smells like old earth and mildew. You sit for a second, back against the wall, light off, just breathing. And for that moment, nothing happens. And that, more than gunshots, more than screams, is what gets under your skin. The not knowing. The quiet moments that stretch too long. The sense that you are never, ever truly alone in here. The hollow heart of Siu Chi. There's something strange that happens to your sense of time down here. It slips sideways. Minutes feel like hours, and hours like fog. There's no sky to orient you. No birdsong or sunbeams. No real difference between midnight and noon. You could be 20 minutes in, or you could have been crawling for 4 hours. You don't know anymore. You move again. Left. Right. Another slope downward. The walls sweat as if they know you're coming. You think of the Siu Chi district maps, the spiderwebs of ink showing the infamous Iron Triangle, where some of the deepest, most elaborate networks were carved into the clay. 3 levels deep in places. Storage rooms, sleeping quarters, field hospitals, kitchens with smokeless chimneys, even schools. A self-sustaining ecosystem dug into the very bones of the earth. In fact, you remember now, one of the more surreal moments from your briefing back at base. The Viet Cong had set up underground surgery rooms where wounded fighters were operated on by candlelight. Sometimes by medics with no formal training, just experience and steady hands. There were accounts of babies being born in these tunnels. Lives both ending and beginning below the jungle floor. It makes you shiver. Now you see it. A bend in the wall. A wooden beam. Another false panel. You press against it, and it swings silently open. Beyond is a larger room, and your beam reveals strange shapes. Woven baskets, rusted metal bowls, clothing lines strung between bamboo beams. Signs of life. Not recent, but not ancient either. The kind of temporary living space that looks abandoned in a hurry. And here's the eerie part. On the dirt floor, there are 3 slippers. Not a pair, 3. 2 large, 1 small. Left behind deliberately, or in panic. You can't say, but it adds to the uncanny weight that settles in your chest. You remember the old rumors. Sometimes the tunnels didn't just hide people. They had stories, too. Things people didn't want to remember. Betrayals. Ghosts. Soldiers spoke of entering rooms that felt colder. Claustrophobic, yes, but also sacred, somehow, or cursed. You swallow the lump in your throat and move into what looks like a mess area. You crouch beside a rusted cooking pot, still half full of rice husks and congealed oil. If you needed a reminder that this war was fought as much on hunger as on firepower, this is it. And the Viet Cong knew it. They ate what they had. They boiled tree bark. They fried roots. They did whatever they had to do to keep breathing. And in these tunnels, even that was a risk. The smoke had to be filtered through layers of bamboo and stone before it exited far away from the source. One mistake, and a single plume could give everything away. As you pass deeper into the heart of the complex, the ceiling lowers again. You're on your belly once more, inching past walls scribbled with marks. Not quite writing. More like tally marks, scratches, dates perhaps. You wonder who carved them. Fighters keeping track of days. A prisoner. Maybe. You don't know. And maybe you're better off not knowing. Suddenly you freeze. You hear it. A soft tapping. Not mechanical. Rhythmic. You hold your breath and count the beats. 1, 2, pause. 3, 4. Is it footsteps? Morse. A pipe knocking? No. It's coming from beneath you. The floor beneath your chest feels warm. Unnaturally warm. There's a second tunnel underneath this one, a double-layered path. You think of the stories. VC units would sometimes dig lower ghost tunnels beneath the main ones, used to ambush enemy tunnel rats from below, or to hide from chemical smoke. Some even led to underground rivers or booby-trapped dead zones. You put your ear to the floor. Nothing now, just the hammering of your own heart. You crawl faster. Soon, you reach a ladder carved directly into the dirt wall, more like notches. You slide down quietly, boots hitting the soft loam below. This chamber is different. It smells metallic, older. You swing your light and see it. A cache of rusted weapons, half buried in clay. Soviet-made AK-47s, disassembled mortars, stacks of ammunition wrapped in plastic and banana leaves. It's a hidden armory. The Viet Cong didn't just survive in these tunnels. They stored the tools of resistance here. While American B-52s carpet-bombed above, while helicopters roared through the treetops, down here, there was still a war being planned. And not just planned, remembered. Because here, on one of the dirt walls, are photographs. Laminated, faded, pinned with thin bamboo pegs. Black and white faces stare back at you. Young men with wide smiles, old farmers with tired eyes, children holding rifles too big for their shoulders. Each one a memory, each one a fragment of something larger. They didn't fight just with guns. They fought with continuity, with the idea that something deeper than tactics was being preserved, that this land, these tunnels, these faces, they were worth enduring for. You sit for a moment, overwhelmed by the weight of it, and then you hear the sound again, the tapping. Closer now, not beneath, behind. You spin, your flashlight flickers. The tunnel behind you is empty. Or is it? You can't tell. You don't wait to find out. You start crawling back the way you came, heart racing, trying to remember which turns you took, what markers you left. Your chalk is gone, maybe washed off, maybe taken, but you still have your instincts, and your fear. And sometimes, in Chi, those are the only maps you get. You crouch lower than usual this time, a little more hesitant than before, because what you've stumbled into now doesn't feel like a tunnel. It feels like a shrine. Not one for gods or ancestors, no. It's a shrine to paranoia, and the kind only man can build for himself. You're in a bomb-making den, but the air feels deceptively still. No movement, no ambient click of rats. Just the kind of quiet that makes your inner ear hum. All around you, strange contraptions rise like grotesque sculptures. Homemade claymore mines. Pressure trigger devices using spoons, twine, and disarmed U.S. grenades. Wires disappear into the earth like roots, except these roots bloom into explosions. And at the center of it all, a plank nailed to the wall, almost reverent, where someone has carefully chalked the words, "Welcome, GI." One wrong step, that's all it takes. And you know that's not a metaphor. You're squatting over a war zone engineered in miniature. In this tight labyrinth, booby traps aren't just threats, they're omnipresent. And each one seems designed with a twisted ingenuity that suggests someone's been reading your manual before you. You pull out your probe. It's just a bayonet with electrical tape around the handle. Simple, quiet, deadly. You prod the dirt ahead of you, tapping for resistance. Every square inch of ground is suspect. You pass your light slowly, almost reluctantly, across the ground. In your periphery, tripwires. Some are taut. Others look deliberately frayed, tempting you to think they're broken. You take a deep breath. The air smells like damp cordite and recycled sweat. There's a bottle wedged into the wall, a Molotov cocktail, rigged to a thread that leads off into the darkness. Another step closer, and it tilts slightly, like it's been waiting for you all night. Here's the real question, though. Why the hell are there personal effects next to these traps? A photo of a child tucked behind a punji stick, a wedding ring tied to a nail, a tiny booklet of Vietnamese poems. Some historians say these were deliberate psychological traps to humanize the trap setter and destabilize you emotionally. Others think it was simply practicality. These tunnels were homes as much as they were war machines. You're crawling through someone's life and workshop in the same breath. You freeze as your light catches a fuse. Not wire. Fuse. It's short on one end. And that's when it hits you. Some of these bombs aren't rigged to go off when you enter. They're set to blow when someone else leaves. Which means whoever was down here might still be. Your mind spins. You suddenly remember that whisper from the surface briefing. Tunnel traps aren't just about killing. They're about turning the mind inside out. And yours? It's already halfway there. You shuffle backward slowly, heart racing like a jackrabbit's. You retrace every movement. You count the steps. 4 to the last fork. 2 paces back up the slant. A low shelf on the right. Yep, still there. That means the punji pit's on your left. And your boot barely misses it this time. As you emerge back into what almost passes for open tunnel, you feel like a man pulled out of a snake's throat. You breathe deeper now. Dust rises with each exhale. Behind you, the booby-trapped room waits in silence, poised like an unspoken curse. Quirky tidbit time. In some tunnels, Viet Cong engineers left fake explosive traps, completely inert, just to waste your time and test your nerve. One Marine reportedly disarmed 12 dummy bombs in a row, only to find the 13th was very real. Historians still argue whether the use of psychological decoys like this was improvised genius or formally taught in VC sapper schools. Either way, you learn something down there. Not just about how traps are made, but why. It's not about the kill. It's about creating a zone where you question every breath you take. That's the real bomb, the one in your head. And now, you keep crawling. Slower, wiser, every nerve on edge. Because after what you've seen, it's clear the tunnel doesn't just contain war. It is war, compacted, coiled, and ready to snap. The tunnel forks again. This time, there's no sign, no footprints, no helpful glint of disturbed dust to guide your choice. Left vanishes into a tight crawl space where the air already smells fouled, burnt, like old motor oil mixed with damp rice. Right curves upward ever so slightly, and you think you see a sliver of air. Light? Or just your exhausted brain begging for relief? You pause. Your ears tune in, stretching beyond the damp echoes. Nothing. Then, drip, drip, drip. It's rhythmic, unnatural. You follow it. To the right you crawl, breathing shallow, elbowing forward like a lizard. The tunnel narrows until your shoulders brush both sides. You shift your pack, belly down, and squirm like a worm through black soil. Then, suddenly, the space blooms outward. You're in another chamber, barely high enough to kneel. Your flashlight reveals a disturbing gallery. Wooden crates, stacked neatly along the walls. You edge closer, brushing away cobwebs and a damp red cloth. Inside, U.S. rations. See ration cans, salt tablets, fruitcake tins. Beside them, Chinese ammunition crates, each labeled in faded Mandarin script. And next to that, Soviet field bandages, still sealed. This is a logistics node, a stockpile hub, a whole war effort, compressed and buried. You're not just crawling through mud anymore. You're crawling through ideology. The Cold War is alive and sweaty right here beneath your elbows. In the center of the chamber, a low table built from crates. Upon it lies a folded map, creased from use, smudged with greasy fingerprints. It's your own unit's patrol routes. Hand-drawn, annotated. Someone's been watching you from the shadows, and they know your patterns better than you do. You stare, and then you notice the cup beside it, still half full. Tea, rice water, doesn't matter. Someone's been here recently. Maybe still is. Your breath shallows. You sweep your light slowly, left to right. There, a boot print in soft dirt, small and barefoot. A child's? It makes your stomach churn. Because in this place, children are not children. They are scouts, couriers, sometimes even fighters. You think of your own kid brother back home, trading baseball cards and reading comic books. Here, that same kid might be laying wire traps and hauling grenades under cover of jungle fog. You inch backward, careful not to disturb anything. One accidental nudge could set off a tripwire or alert a sentry. You backtrack into the previous corridor, then pause to scrawl a crude X on the tunnel wall with your chalk. It's a habit now, a way to mark danger, or maybe just proof that you existed down here. The crawl resumes. Another hour? Maybe two. Time dilates. You begin to hallucinate faces in the soil, eyelids in the root systems. Some part of your brain says, that's just fatigue. But another part, deeper and older, says, these tunnels are haunted, not by ghosts, by the sheer intent of so many lives lived and lost in darkness. Eventually, you hear it, a hollow knocking sound, repetitive, deliberate. You press your ear to the dirt wall. There's again, TCH, 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 TCH. Code, Morse. You don't respond. You freeze. Whoever's signaling either thinks you're VC or knows you're not. Either way, you're compromised. You switch off your light and let the dark cradle you. You hold your breath. The knocking continues. Slower now, less structured, almost playful. That's when you realize it's not code. It's dripping water, striking a rusted metal bowl that's been left to catch it. But your nerves are so fried, your brain turn it into a threat. That's what this place does. It remixes your senses, plays back your fears through sound, scent, silence. You crawl past it, further down, and then cool air. It's faint, but real. You feel it brushing your face. A shift in pressure, a moist sigh that carries the smell of surface growth. Moss, wood rot, and sun-baked bamboo. You scramble forward, desperate, lungs heaving in anticipation. And then you see it, a slit in the tunnel wall, jagged and narrow, an old rat hole perhaps, enlarged. You wedge yourself through it, pack grinding on roots and stone. You nearly leave your boots behind, and then you emerge into a sunken hollow, deep in the triple canopy jungle. Vines curtain the entrance behind you. No path, no trail, just ferns and birdsong and the deafening absence of war. You slump against a tree root, sweat drying fast as the breeze hits your face. You made it out, alive, for now. But you know what the tunnel took from you? Your sense of scale, of time, of identity. It compacted you, compressed you into something raw and unfiltered. You went in as a soldier. You came out a ghost. You stopped counting the number of days you've spent underground. It doesn't matter anymore. What matters now is the feel of the earth. Dry, warm, sometimes wet with something that probably shouldn't be wet. And the silent rhythm of breathing that isn't yours. You know when someone's close by the way the air shifts, the way your instincts tighten. And tonight, as you crouch inside the heart of an enemy tunnel system, it's one of those nights. You aren't alone down here. At first glance, you might think these tunnels, nicknamed Black Echo by some American units, are just a crude hideaway. But no, they are vast, multi-level organisms, part living maze, part death trap. And on this night, you're navigating one of the more notorious stretches, beneath Siuchi here. The tunnels aren't just shelter. They're sanctuaries, arsenals, command posts, sleeping quarters, even hospitals. You slide forward, shoulder brushing clay walls, careful not to shift too much dirt. Any wrong move could signal your presence. You pause to feel the texture of the wall. It's been reinforced here. Bamboo lattice, maybe old oil drums, sometimes even salvaged French concrete. You run your fingers along one seam, and you know, this section was repaired recently. That means it's still active. Your flashlight is taped with red cellophane to dull the glare. The beam dances across a low shelf where a rusted canteen sits. next to a neatly folded shirt and an oil lantern. Someone's home. You know from prior missions that these spaces are often booby-trapped, sometimes with grenades tucked into bedrolls or under buckets of water. But the real danger is subtler tonight. Your foot touches something soft, a wire. You freeze. Carefully, you follow the wire with your gloved fingers. It runs along the wall, disappearing into a low hole to your left. You backtrack slowly. Not every tripwire sets off an explosion. Some call in the living, like a soft bell tugged gently in the middle of the night. You turn off your light, and you listen. Silence. Then, a faint scratching. Not rats. Not earth settling. This is fingernails or tool metal or something shaped by intent. You crouch low, bracing your weight on one heel. The noise grows. At times like this, you remember what old tunnel rats used to say. It's not the killing that gets you. It's the waiting. You ease around a curve, crawling into a wider chamber. The space is about the size of a small bathroom, but the air is different, warmer, musty with stale incense. There's a niche carved into the clay wall, and in it sits a tiny shrine. A stick of incense still smolders beside a cracked photograph of a young woman in black and white. She's smiling, frozen in time, likely unaware her image now watches over a war bunker. You resist the urge to stare too long. And here's something historians still debate. Did the VC build these shrines out of fear, reverence, or spiritual defense? Was it an emotional shield against the bloodshed that filled the earth around them? Or just a custom carried underground out of habit? Either way, you nod toward her, just in case. Your mission tonight is simple on paper. Scout the network. Mark any munitions caches. Avoid engagement unless necessary. But no one tells you what to do when your flashlight catches eyes looking back at you. You lock onto them. 2 feet away, a teenage boy crouches, frozen like a mouse in a trap. He's barefoot, wearing nothing but shorts and a shirt. No weapon in sight. Just a sack in one hand, clutched to his chest. You raise your pistol, finger steady, but not on the trigger. The tunnel air is so still it feels like the scene is underwater. You could shout, but your Vietnamese is limited. You could shoot, but then what? You never know if he was just a courier or a bait decoy, or someone sent to lure you toward a trapdoor beneath your feet. You decide on a third option. You back away, slowly, maintaining eye contact until the bend in the tunnel hides him from view. You won't report him, not because you're soft, but because you're tired. Tired of playing God in the dirt. Outside, the other rats laugh when you tell the story. You let him go. One says, he'll come back with a knife next time. Maybe. Or maybe he'll remember that not all tunnel ghosts shoot. Maybe. That night, in your cot back at base, you dream of the shrine woman. She's handing you something. A candle. You don't light it. You just hold it in the dark and wait. You're starting to forget what real silence sounds like. Not the kind of silence that hums with life, like back home in the woods before a thunderstorm. Not the silence between two lovers just before a kiss. No, this silence is tighter. It's the quiet that chokes out breath. A burial silence. The kind that war breeds when it drives men too far inside themselves. Tonight, your squad is staging an ambush just beyond the Ben Hai River. Technically, you're in South Vietnam, but everything about the jungle here pulses with North Vietnamese intent. The trees bend low like conspirators, and even the frogs stop croaking when you move too quickly. This patch of forest isn't owned by any army. It belongs to memory, to trauma, to ghosts. You're lying in a natural ditch, camouflaged beneath a blanket of damp leaves and mosquito netting. You've been here since dusk, waiting. Somewhere up the trail, a small NVA unit is supposed to be moving weapons south. If the intel is right, they'll pass by in the next few hours. But if the intel's wrong, and it often is, then you've been lying here for no reason. The soldier next to you is called Rocks, not because he's tough, but because he carries a pouch of them in his pocket. From my backyard, he told you once. Back in Georgia. I keep him so I don't forget where solid ground is. He fingers one now, round and pale against his dark glove. Time passes without measure. Minutes bleed into each other until you lose count. Somewhere nearby, a monkey screams, a bird takes flight, and the sound sends your pulse racing. You know better than to flinch. The jungle punishes noise. You breathe through your nose, slowly, using the techniques taught in seer school. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. Again. Then you hear it, footsteps. Not many. 3, maybe 4 sets. Light, careful. You shift your gaze forward, your hand tightening around the grip of your M16. You hear whispered Vietnamese. It's hard to tell what they're saying, but one word comes through clearly. My American. They know you're here, or they suspect. The squad leader, Lieutenant Breen, gives the hand signal. Hold. You obey. You could open fire now and take down the lead man, but you'd give away your position, and if they have more units behind them, you'll be overrun before dawn. So you wait. The hardest thing in war isn't the fighting, it's the waiting. The footsteps stop. One of them kneels, probably to inspect a footprint or broken twig. You hear him murmur something to the others. Rox tenses beside you. You feel in your bones, this is going to go bad. And then, the flare. A sudden burst of white light fills the trees. One of the NBA soldiers must have heard something suspicious, because he fired a flare overhead, lighting up your position like a stage play. Breen yells, "Go," and everything turns violent in an instant. You roll up and fire into the tree line. 2 figures drop. Rox takes a round to the shoulder, spins backward, and disappears behind a root. The third man bolts right, disappearing into the foliage. You hear him screaming, not in fear, but calling out for others. You chase, not because you're ordered to, not because it's smart, but because sometimes in war you act on reflex, on raw instinct. Your boots hammer the earth. Vines whip your face. You duck under a branch, leap a log, and then, suddenly, you're falling. A pit, a narrow one, covered with thin bamboo slats and palm fronds. You slam into the mud at the bottom, breath knocked out of you. Pain blossoms in your leg. You feel something warm, wet. You look down. A bamboo spike has pierced your thigh. You scream, not out loud. Your training doesn't allow that. But inside, something tears loose. You grip the spike and try to lift yourself off, but the pain is sharp, jagged, like lightning forged from rust. You slump back, your vision blurring. Above you, someone moves. You raise your rifle. A young Vietnamese man peers down. It's the one who ran. His chest heaves. You both lock eyes. His rifle is lowered. So is yours. Then, in a moment that defies every rule of war, he tosses something into the pit. A bandage, wrapped neatly, tied with twine. He stares for a second longer. Then he vanishes. You're too stunned to speak. Later, Breen and the squad find you. They lift you out with ropes and branches. You're medevac to Da Nang. You lose a pint of blood. You gain 4 stitches and a lot of questions. Back in your cot, high on morphine, you hold that bandage in your palm. It's not a military issue. Homemade. Probably torn from a civilian shirt. It smells faintly of wood smoke and soap. You don't know what to make of it. You could tell command, but you don't. Not because you're afraid, but because you're beginning to understand something most books won't say. Even in war, mercy is a kind of rebellion. And sometimes, mercy haunts deeper than violence ever could. A standoff in the roots. There's a moment, somewhere deep in that thick jungle lattice of clay, tree root, and ancient Vietnamese soil, where time just refuses to move forward. You crouch there, breath lodged in your throat like a stuck cartridge, because somewhere up ahead in the pitch black of that tunnel, right where the air turns into syrup, you've heard something. A click, maybe, or a shuffle. Could have been a rat. Could have been a mine. Could have been someone waiting, with a blade so silent you wouldn't know it was in you until the pain arrived late and confused. This moment is what every tunnel rat dreads most. Not the firefight, not the collapse, not even the gas. It's the silence before the choice. Do you keep crawling forward, or do you freeze, silently begging the jungle to choose for you? Earlier that morning, you were above ground sipping lukewarm water from your canteen and try not to think about what today might hold. The humidity already had its claws in your neck, dragging sweat from places you didn't know could sweat. Someone told a joke about General Westmoreland being afraid of his own shadow, and you laughed. Not because it was funny, but because laughing lets you forget, for half a second, that soon you'd be slipping underground again. Alone. The tunnel you were assigned to today is located beneath what used to be a rice paddy. The area had been bombed so many times that any trace of agriculture was now a wet graveyard of cratered earth and swamp-mucked bones. They called this section of tunnel the Banyan Artery, after the tangled banyan roots that pierced the tunnel's walls like ancient veins. You hate this one, not because it's too tight, though it is, or too dark, though that too, but because once months ago, someone went down this exact route and didn't come back. His name was Ortiz. No one talks about him anymore. You lower yourself into the entrance and feel it immediately. That sensation like you're being swallowed. The lip of the tunnel seals over your shoulders like a mouth, and the light from the surface vanishes in under 3 feet. You flick on your flashlight, a dull, flickering beam powered by batteries that may or may not have been stolen from a cassette player 2 bases away. In here, reliability is more suggestion than fact. The walls are tighter than you remember. Your shoulders scrape, and your boots snag on thick root clusters. You pass an old booby trap, a rusted tripwire connected to a spring-loaded bamboo spike. Someone already triggered it. You wonder if it was Ortiz. And then it happens. That sound. A whisper. No, a breath. Maybe even a cough. You freeze. Your ears strain in the silence. The soil presses against your cheek as you lower yourself to the ground. Heart pounding, so hard your ribs feel like they're buzzing. Somewhere ahead, 6 feet, 10 feet, maybe more, someone is there. Tunnel rats didn't just fear ambush. They feared the moments when nothing happened. Because when it's silent, your mind fills in the blanks. Is that a spider crawling across your boot? Is that pressure on your back, the tunnel ceiling shifting? Are those footsteps, or the echo of your own heartbeat? And now you're caught in the standoff. You can't see them, and they can't see you. But you're both there, breathing, waiting. This, historians say, is what made tunnel rat duty a psychological minefield. Not just because you could die, but because sometimes you had to wait in perfect stillness for long enough that your sense of time and self began to dissolve. The military issued no training manual for what to do in a silent face-off. No pamphlet with cheery illustrations to guide you when you felt like the jungle was folding you into its lungs. The official procedure? None really. You just had to decide. Crawl forward and risk it being a trap. Stay put and risk suffocation. Retreat and risk court-martial. Pick your poison. Some tunnel rats developed rituals. One guy used to hum the battle hymn of the Republic before making any move. Another carried a tiny wooden cross he'd tap 3 times against the wall before every junction. You, though? You count to 47. Always 47. No one remembers why. You just do. 27, 28. And then the flashlight flickers again. Dies. Pitch black. This, ironically, helps. Because in darkness, your ears sharpen. You hear the tunnel breathe again, this time from behind. Just airflow. You hope. 39, 40. The weight of your weapon in your hand reminds you. If someone's in here, they're no more comfortable than you are. Whoever it is, they're in the same suffocating, airless nightmare. Which means one thing. He's waiting for you to make the mistake. You reach in your vest pocket and retrieve a rock. Smooth, heavy, river-washed. Something you picked up back near in key. You toss it forward, just hard enough to make a noise. It clacks against a root, tumbles, stops, then silence, then the tiniest rustle, far right, followed by the telltale sound of breath catching. You flick the light on one last time. For half a second, the beam hits something, a figure, thin, crouched, not more than 18, frozen in place like you. You both lock eyes. No one moves. Then, like two spirits haunting the same corner of hell, you both retreat. You backwards, him forward. The standoff ends with no blood, no explosion, just mutual survival. Later, when you emerge from the tunnel, soaked, shaking, and blinking like a mole, no one asks what you saw. You won't tell them anyway. Not because you're being dramatic, but because the words would sound ridiculous out loud. I saw someone. That's it. That's everything. Historians still argue whether tunnel rats were more at risk from enemy combatants or from the toll of isolation and sensory deprivation. Some say it was the mines and traps. Others insist it was the hallucinations that came after days without sunlight. One fringe theory even suggests that the darkness triggered something deeper, a kind of buried ancestral fear, a memory of the womb, inverted and weaponized. All you know is this: in that tunnel, in that moment, you weren't a soldier. You weren't even human. You were instinct. You were patience. You were fear, wrapped in camouflage. And fear, at least tonight, got to crawl back out alive. The secret signals you learned to read. You've long since stopped depending on spoken commands. Down here in the dark, sound is dangerous. It alerts the enemy. It disorients. It dies too quickly in tight earth corridors and ricochets off walls in confusing ways. Instead, you read signs, tiny ones. Pressure, movement, pattern. It begins with breath. The guy ahead of you, if you're lucky enough to work in a pair, breathes out through his nose in a soft hiss. That's the go forward signal. A tap on the ankle means stop, and 2 taps mean back up quietly. You don't ask why. You just obey, because asking means you're probably already too late. Sometimes, though, there are no teammates. You're alone, crawling like a worm through clay and rot, with nothing to read except your own gut and the tunnel itself. And yet, over time, even the earth begins to speak to you in a language few understand. A change in air pressure. There's an opening ahead, a slightly cooler wall. There might be an underground stream nearby, or worse, a trapdoor to a deeper chamber. You notice these things. You have to. And then there are the smells. The stench of human waste in one area might suggest a rest chamber, while the tang of fuel oil hints at machinery, or perhaps a hidden generator. If you pick up the sour bite of old sweat mixed with mildew, you're likely near a weapons cache, or worse, a recent enemy presence. You sniff like a bloodhound, eyes wide even in the dark. This is not instinct. This is training through repetition, fear, and survival. Most of all, it's touch. You drag your fingertips across walls, feeling for seams that shouldn't be there. Loose clay that might hide a booby trap, or the smoother finish of reinforced timber, suggesting a high-value room. You learn to spot vibrations, the muffled thump of distant boots above, the subtle quake of someone digging or shifting in the tunnel network beside you. You even begin to tell time by the way the walls sweat, cool and dry in the morning, damp and sticky by dusk. Of course, this sensory map works both ways. The enemy also reads the tunnel. They know where echoes die fastest and where footsteps sound sharpest. They booby-trap the places you'd instinctively pause. A beam of sunlight from a cleverly cut vent might beckon you, but it's also where a tripwire waits. Historians still argue whether the NVA's tunnel builders were inspired more by termite mounds or ancient Viet-resistant strategies against the Chinese. Either way, the tunnels weren't just hiding spots. They were chessboards, and every twist in the soil was a potential move. The tunnel rats had to guess the enemy's next play blindfolded and backward. And then there's the use of live animals. Did you know some rats, real ones, were trained by both sides to detect movement? The Americans called them nuisances, but sometimes they followed them, suspecting that the creatures might sense enemy shifts better than men. There's even a fringe story, half laughed off by veterans. That one particular rat named Moses led a tunnel rat clear through a network of death traps into a hidden war room. Whether Moses existed or not, the tale says more about the faith you place in the smallest signals when logic fails. The farther you go, the more you trust feelings you can't explain. Why does one passage feel wrong? Why do you hesitate before turning left, even though the tunnel's wider? There's no data, no reason, just a tingle. And half the time, that's the only thing that keeps you breathing. In the dark, you start to hear things. The crunch of dirt behind you that vanishes when you stop. Your own heartbeat gets so loud it sounds like footsteps. Even your breathing turns suspect. Sometimes, it's not your breath at all. You freeze. Wait. Feel. If nothing shifts, you keep going. But you always wonder if something just held still, waiting for you to move first. One tunnel rat famously said, "You don't walk through tunnels. You listen through them." He wasn't being poetic. He meant it literally. Every inch forward was granted only if the silence permitted. If the earth whispered back with warning, you obeyed. So here you are now, flattened in a squeezed tunnel barely wide enough for your shoulders, face tilted to one side to breathe. Your flashlight is off. You only use it for seconds at a time. Instead, you let your fingers trail ahead. You count time in heartbeats, measure distance by pressure changes in your ears, and plot maps by memory, not sight. And when you return to the surface, if you do, you can't explain it. Your buddy asks what you saw, and you shrug. Nothing, you say. Just dirt. But deep down, you know the dirt spoke to you. And you spoke back. The heartbeat of echo, listening for breathing walls. It's a different kind of silence in the tunnel tonight. You crouch low, back sticky against the packed earth, flashlight flickering low, its red filter dim enough not to betray your position. The breathing walls around you seem to hum with nervous anticipation, as if they too are waiting for something to move, to betray itself. It's not just your imagination. Down here, the earth does breathe, or at least, it feels like it does when you press your ear against it. You ease down, side of your helmet scraping the low ceiling, and place a gloved hand flat on the dirt. You've learned to feel for things others ignore. Vibrations in the soil, subtle shifts in pressure, and even warmth leaking through from bodies further ahead. But your most sensitive tool tonight is your chest. Every heartbeat echoing in your ears. Try not to drown out the faint scratching, the shallow cough, or the distant thud of movement behind a false wall. This tunnel has the feel of a place that's been altered. The air is too still, and the floor just slightly more level than usual, a possible sign of booby trap pressure plates. You remember the Marine who crawled into a tunnel like this last month and never came back. Not because he was ambushed, but because the walls collapsed on him. The Viet Cong had rigged it with soft explosives triggered by air displacement. It's a technique that modern engineers still debate for its eerie precision. Did they really have the resources to make it that exact? Or was it a fluke? Historians still argue whether these soil-trigger collapses were tactical innovations or the accidental result of overly brittle walls. You reach a junction. One path drops lower, in what smells like standing water. The other curves slightly and rises. Less risky, but more likely to be a trap. You flick your flashlight toward the rising passage, and your beam catches something that shouldn't be there. A handprint in the clay. Still moist. Still warm. Not yours. It's an unmistakable marker. Someone has passed through here recently. Possibly watching. Possibly waiting. Instead of panicking, you still yourself. This is where you have to listen with more than just your ears. You breathe in deeply, slowing your pulse. Each exhale is deliberate, measured. You count silently to 5, and then press the stethoscope-like device in your pack. The kind tunnel rats jury rig for medical kits and old radio parts. Against the wall. You listen. There. A breath. Shallow. Repeating. Someone is on the other side. You withdraw quietly. There's a trick you learned in training, actually from an Australian advisor, who had picked it up from Gurkhas in the Burma campaign. If you suspect someone's waiting in an alcove or pocket tunnel, you toss a pebble or small metal screw just beyond it. If the watcher flinches, even imperceptibly, the dirt gives it away. It's crude sonar, really. You reach into your pouch and flick a rusted washer underhanded past the corner. There's a delay, then a small puff, like dust shifting, and that's all you need. You leap forward, low and fast, weapon pointed into the darkness. But there's no one there now. Only the remains of a crushed rice bowl and an overturned satchel. Inside, wrapped in plastic, is a map, hand-drawn, showing branches of this very tunnel system. One section marked with a red X. Could be an ammo dump. Could be a command post. Could be a trap for someone like you. But one thing's for sure. They knew someone would come down here, and they wanted to be heard, just not seen. Later, back in the daylight, you find out something odd. The map you retrieved matches aerial reconnaissance taken weeks ago, including sections no known prisoner ever described. No one can explain how a crude, hand-drawn map matches topography we only recently captured via U-2 overflight. Some claim they had spies. Others claim they had a sixth sense for the terrain. Either way, you don't sleep that night. The things you smell before you die. There are stories told in base camps and whispered in tents, half warnings, half rituals, about the things you smell before you die in the jungle. Burnt peanut oil, old soap, wet fish, diesel from a generator that hasn't run in years, rotting garlic. Your brain tries to make sense of the final seconds, and your senses throw up memories from childhood, from far-off kitchens, from phantom markets in a country you've never been to. Smell is the first language of fear, and down here in the tunnels, it's always speaking. Tonight, the stench is wrong. Not rotting flesh, that's its own alarm bell. Not explosives, that's obvious. This is something more subtle, like overheated metal, and ammonia, maybe rat piss, maybe something more deliberate. You crawl slower, nostrils flaring behind your wet bandana. A corner up ahead is unusually dark. Not the kind of dark from absence of light, but the kind that swallows your flashlight beam as if the dust itself is rejecting illumination. You pause. Inhale again. There it is. Sweetness. Sickening, perfumed sweetness. Your heart rate spikes because you've heard about this. Viet Cong sometimes lace traps with rotting fruit, soaked in perfume oils. It draws rats and centipedes away from their own routes and toward yours. But sometimes they laced it with something else. A chemical marker, a way to track movement, a way to leave scent trails for trained dogs. Or worse, a decoy that tricks your dogs. You feel for your rifle strap. You don't remember shifting your grip. You don't remember clenching your jaw. But your body knows before your brain admits it. You're walking into a death trap. A rat skitters over your foot. You freeze. Not from fear of rats, but because it's running in the wrong direction, toward the scent. Either it's been trained, or something far worse lies behind you. You move forward. The tunnel opens just slightly, like a throat widening to swallow. You recognize the signs now. A carved chamber used for storage, sleeping, or ambush. This one is bedding. Rags soaked in sweat, dried rice kernels ground into the dirt. The remains of incense sticks burnt down to stubs. There are words scratched into the walls in faded chalk. One of them is in French, Tu es déjà mort. You are already dead. And next to it, a tally. At least 23 hash marks, 4 of them grouped, 1 solo. You count again. There's a sound behind you. Not a footstep. Not breathing. Not rats. Dripping. 1 drop. Then 2. Then silence. You raise your head slowly to the low ceiling. There, crudely hung wire, soldered to a mechanism you almost missed. A bamboo stick, a ceramic plate, a glass vial. Primitive chemistry, but deadly. The sweet smell was the trigger. You've been under a chemical snare the whole time. You don't move. Instead, you speak quietly. Not to yourself. Not to a squad mate. To whoever said it. You watching. Your voice doesn't echo. It flattens, deadened by the thick clay. But somewhere in the air, you feel it bounce. Like someone listening, judging, deciding. You ease back. Slowly. Carefully. Your gloved fingers drag against the earth, praying that whatever's inside that vial, be it mustard gas, homemade sarin, or even accursed ancestral fluid, stays intact. You make it past the scent marker, back into the main artery of the tunnel. Your pulse doesn't slow for 10 minutes. Later, back in the firebase, when you sketch out the trap for intelligence, the officers don't believe the sophistication. One claims it's impossible. Another mutters about old French colonial labs left behind. A third says nothing, just stares out the tent flap and lights a cigarette. But you know what you smelled. You know what they meant when they said, "The jungle eats memory, but remembers the dead." And now you're part of that memory, whether you live or not. Ray makes ghosts loud. When you return above ground, everything is louder. Not because the jungle has changed, but because your ears have. Time in the tunnels alters perception. Down there, the world is muffled, compressed, squeezed inward like breath before drowning. But up here, under the open sky, surrounded by swaying trees and chattering insects, the volume turns violent. Cicadas scream, leaves slap together. Raindrops fall like marbles on canvas tarps. You emerge near dusk. Rain's been falling in slow sheets for hours, turning the red soil to thick paste. Your boots gain weight with every step. The squad fans out across the slope in a semicircle, rifles at the ready. No one says much. You've all seen too much down below. Rain makes ghosts loud, the old saying goes. And today, the ghosts are stomping. You hear them first in the distance, bamboo slapping back into place, branches snapping where no one walks. Then whispers, actual whispers, not imagined, not in your head. Short, sharp syllables pass from tree to tree like notes in an invisible classroom. There's a small clearing up ahead. You're familiar with it from the last recon photos. An old French rubber station burned down in '54. Only the foundation stones remain, moss-covered and half-sunk. But something new has arrived. 5 stick figures, tied with black thread, nailed to the stumps in a perfect circle. Each one wears a fragment of an American uniform. You stop. So does the squad. Rain drips from helmet brims. It slides down your collar, soaks your undershirt, pools in your boots. You ignore it. You crouch down to examine the nearest all. It has a name stitched onto it. Waters. Your breath catches. Private Waters died 3 weeks ago, ambushed outside Firebase Keating. You were the one who zipped his body bag, and now here his name is, stitched in black cotton thread on a sodden puppet made of twigs and bone shards. The others have names too. You recognize everyone. Corporal Mahoney, lost to a sniper's round. Sergeant Lewis, bled out during the last recon. Doc Alvarez, IED, took his legs. Didn't scream, just stared at you while his eyes fogged. And the last, blank, just a patch of torn uniform. No name, but you know who it's meant for. You. Your squad leader doesn't hesitate. Orders are snapped. Defensive perimeter established. A call is made to the firebase. Artillery will be walking in 5 minutes. You to fall back to LZ Ivory. Helicopter in 40. The jungle doesn't care. The jungle eats time. And in the 20 minutes it takes to move out, you hear singing. Low, childlike, in Vietnamese. One of your men, a kid from Detroit named Banks, starts humming it back, unconsciously. When you slap him on the shoulder, he doesn't look angry. He looks terrified. I didn't mean to, he says, voice trembling. It just got in. You don't blame him. The sound is like an infection. Before long, 3 more men are humming. You bark orders, make them drink water, chew coffee beans, slap their faces. Anything to drown it out. But the sound follows. from canopy to bush, from branch to bone. And when the chopper finally thuds in, rotor wash flattening the grass and flinging rain sideways, no one speaks. You all climb aboard like prisoners waiting for sentencing. No one wipes their weapons. No one unhooks gear. You just sit, soaking, staring at nothing. The door gunner gives you a glance, then gives a small nod toward the jungle. You see them too? He asks, yelling over the noise. You don't answer, because yes, you do. Through the blur of rain and tree, you catch glimpses, figures painted in mud, crouched in impossible places, not moving, not breathing, watching, and in their eyes, memory. Rain makes ghosts loud, but silence, real silence, is worse. Because silence means they've chosen to wait, and you've already been named. Why the clay hates you. You've never been in love with the earth here. Not even when it's calm. Not even when it's dry. Especially not when it's wet. Because this isn't soft American soil. This isn't something you could plant corn in. It's angry clay, red, sticky, and so dense it feels like it remembers being broken. It clings to you with purpose, seeping into your uniform, coating your weapon, filling the grooves of your fingerprints like it's trying to overwrite your identity. You don't walk through it, you fight it, and you swear it fights back. They don't warn you in training that the clay will feel alive, that in the tunnels, when it collapses around your shoulders and forces its way into your mouth and ears, it won't feel like dirt. It'll feel like breath, wet, suffocating breath, like something exhaling from the deep, slow and patient. Today you're clearing a collapsed shaft outside Fumai. The map calls it Sector 9A, but your unit has renamed it the Womb because of how tight it gets. This one collapsed weeks ago, caved in by a bombing run that was supposed to disable enemy movement. What the Air Force didn't know, or didn't care, is that American soldiers were inside at the time. 2, maybe 3. They never got pulled out. Until now. Command says the shaft might still hold intel. Radios, journals, maybe even VC documents fused inside old boots or bandoliers. So your job today isn't combat, it's recovery. A polite term for grave robbery. You lower yourself into the mouth of the earth, rope around your waist, shovel strapped to your back, breathing through cloth soaked in Vicks to block the rot. The first few feet are stable, clay hardened by heat and time. Then it softens. You feel the shift, not on the walls, but in your gut, like you've entered a space that resents your intrusion. And that's the thing no one writes about, how the clay feels, not just as a substance, but as a presence, a memory, a reaction. It knows who doesn't belong. It knows who's walked on it without reverence. It clings harder to foreigners. Americans sink deeper than locals. At least, that's what one ARVN soldier told you. She tastes your blood, he said once, tapping his boot in the muck. And if she doesn't like it, she drinks more. You thought it was superstition. Until now. You dig, one shovelful at a time. Soon, the air grows wet with rot. You've broken through into what used to be a sleeping nook. There's no body, at first. Just scraps, webbing, a torn M1911 holster. You reach for it, and your fingers brush bone. Not long bone, not leg, not arm. Fingers, still wrapped around the holster, still clenched. You draw back, heart in your mouth. Not because you're afraid of the dead, but because of the position. The hand is curled upward, reaching toward the roof. Not limp, not collapsed, reaching. And that tells you everything. He died trying to dig out. You pause. Close your eyes. Not out of prayer, but out of respect. Maybe both. You keep digging. You find a dog tag. Name scrubbed smooth by rust and time. Then a boot. Empty. Then fabric. OD green, US issued, badly shredded. Then something odd. A patch of the wall. Pulses. You blink. Shake your head. Probably your flashlight flickering. You touch it. It's warm. Clay isn't supposed to be warm this deep. You press harder. A seam gives. Then another. Suddenly, collapse. You fall into a side pocket chamber. You cough, spit dirt, swing your light around. And there, carved into the far wall, is a mural. A real one. Clay sculpted into low relief. Primitive. Crude. It shows men crawling into the earth, then melting, then screaming. At the center, a figure. Not VC, not American, not even human. Something between a woman and a wave, with arms of coral and eyes of fireflies. You step closer. The face is smooth clay, but when your light hits it from the side, it casts your own shadow on the far wall. You freeze, breathe in, and the mural exhales. The clay shifts, just slightly beneath your boots. Not enough to fall, just enough to whisper, "Go back." You do. No intel is worth this. Above ground, you don't explain. You just hand in the dog tag and walk away. Let the clay keep its secrets. It already knows yours. The things we don't say out loud. You spent months in this war learning how to speak without ever saying anything. A look, a nod, a grunt through clenched teeth. Silence is safer than honesty. And in Vietnam, silence often feels like the only armor that still works after the rest is soaked through. There are things you never say, even when they burn the back of your throat like jungle fever. Not because you're afraid of being wrong, but because you're afraid of being right. Like how you know when someone's about to die. It's never dramatic, never comes with ominous music. No voice whispers, "This is the one." It's quieter than that. Subtle. A slack in the shoulders. A delay in reaction time. A joke that doesn't land the way it used to. You see it in the way a guy hesitates before zipping up his flak vest, or the way he fingers the beads around his neck too many times during briefing. A look in the eye like the soul has started packing early, just in case. And you never say, "He's not coming back," because that might make it true. So when Doc Ryan starts rubbing the same spot on his left forearm, over and over, eyes always distant, voice always half a step slower, you don't ask. You don't call it out. You just start watching him a little closer. Not out of pity, out of instinct, because you've seen the signs. And war teaches you that sometimes noticing is a kind of love. You're on perimeter duty that night, southeast trench line, near Siu Chi. The jungle here grows with a kind of thirst. Vines wrap around sandbags like they're trying to drink the gunpowder inside. The moon is just a smear through wet clouds. Visibility, a joke. It's you, Doc Ryan, and Wellesley, another New Yorker, red-haired, and prone to talking about pizza with religious reverence. You've dug a foxhole so deep the walls sweat. You sit in it like monks in a grave, trading whispers about things that used to matter. Wellesley's voice breaks the dark. You think anyone's going to remember this? Like, this exact moment? This damn night? You don't answer right away. Because the question is too honest. Because you wonder the same. Doc speaks first. No one remembers mud. Wellesley smirks. Poetic. Ryan shrugs. It's just true. Then he does it again, rubs his forearm. Same spot. Same motion. The way you've seen wounded dogs lick scars long after the bleeding stops. You finally ask, too softly to be a challenge. Still hurting? He flinches. Not from pain. From being noticed. "Nah," he says. It's just he pauses. "When I was a kid, my brother carved a cross there with a screwdriver. Told me it'd protect me." Dumb, right? You don't answer. Because it's not dumb. It's the truest thing you've heard in weeks. Doc goes quiet. But you know he's thinking about it. About the brother, the blood, the belief. Maybe wondering if the scar is still glowing in the dark. Maybe hoping it is. You pass him the last cigarette. He takes it like communion. You all sit in silence again, the kind that grows roots and hangs moss from your soul. Then the ground quivers. Not a shell, not thunder, a vibration. Low, long deep in the bone. Wellesley rises half an inch. What the hell? You raise your M16. Nothing moves in the trees, but the tremble continues, like something tunneling beneath you. Not rats. Bigger. Too big. You press your ear to the dirt. A mistake. Because you hear it. Breathing. Not mechanical. Not human. Like lungs the size of trucks. Slow, patient, ancient. You scramble upright. So does Ryan. Wellesley doesn't. He just stares, eyes wide. Guys, he says, voice brittle. I think I saw something. In the mud. You follow his gaze. At the edge of your foxhole, where the wall drips slowly back into sludge, is a shape. A swirl. Spiral. Coral pink, like something soft beneath the sea. It pulses once, then melts back into the clay. Gone. None of you speak for a long time, because there's no word for it. And even if there was, you wouldn't say it out loud. You stay awake the rest of the night, rifle on your knees, ears to the earth. But the breathing doesn't return. Only silence. Only the memory of things better left unnamed. When you come home, you never really arrive. You make it back, not because of luck, not because of skill. You make it back because some crooked equation of mud, steel, and mercy tilted slightly in your favor. There's no parade, no dreamlike moment where you step off a plane and fall into warm embraces. There's just arrival. Quiet, awkward, creaking arrival. You land on a tarmac that smells like hot concrete and old gum. Nobody claps. Nobody salutes. The guy next to you pukes on his boots. Another lights a cigarette too early and gets yelled at. The war is behind you. Technically, but not really. It's packed in your duffel, folded into your spine, clinging to your molars. You're issued some final forms, told to sign them. You don't even read what they say. Your pen just moves. A medic offers you pamphlets about counseling. You nod, but your hand doesn't reach out. You leave with the same duffel bag you arrived with, except it feels heavier, like it absorbed every moment of silence, every scream you never let out, every shadow that followed you from patrol. At home, your mother sets the table with too much food. Your father clears his throat too many times. Your sister doesn't know what to say, so she tells you about a movie you missed, something with Steve McQueen and a motorcycle. You smile, but it's a crooked thing. Your face forgot how to shape joy properly. That first night back, the house feels foreign. Carpet too soft, lights too clean. You fall asleep on the floor by the bed, back against the wall. Muscle memory. In your dream, it rains over true lie. The mud rises up like a mouth. You get a job. Something simple. Warehouse work. Repetition helps. Boxes don't scream. Pallets don't bleed. You lift. You place. You breathe. But sometimes, you smell diesel and your throat closes. Sometimes a nail gun goes off too close and your legs fold. People don't understand why you walk in circles before entering rooms, or why you hate ceiling fans, or why the sound of a Coke can opening makes you flinch. You don't explain. You can't explain, because there's no map for this kind of terrain, no field manual for memory. The VA lines are long. Paperwork gets lost. One time, they call you by someone else's name. You don't correct them. At least it's a name. At least someone said it. You see Ryan again, in a diner near the harbor. He's skinnier, hair longer, still rubs the same spot on his arm. You sit across from each other. No salute, no handshake, just coffee. Black. You talk around the war. Not about it. You tell each other fragments. Like two people assembling a broken mirror, afraid of their own reflections. Ryan says Wellesley never came home. Mia, presumed dead, but no body. You don't say what you saw in the mud that night. Ryan doesn't ask. You both know. That's enough. When you leave, he hugs you. First time you've been touched in months. You go home and scrub your hands until they bleed. Sometimes you wake in the middle of the night, heart racing, sweat freezing. You reach for your rifle. It's not there. It's never there. You stare at the ceiling fan. It doesn't turn. Still, you wait for the blades. Still, you listen for choppers. Still, you hear the sound of breathing, not yours, beneath the floorboards. You whisper names like prayers. Zapata, Nguyen, Wellesley, Chica, Jalomi. Sometimes you speak them out loud, like calling for someone across a river. And sometimes, you swear the river calls back. The world moves on. Vietnam becomes a documentary, a textbook entry, a protest chant. A movie with fake mud and slow motion bullets. But for you, it never ends. It's there when you button your shirt too fast. There when you smell rice and think of burn patties. There when a red light flashes too long. You carry it like a second skin. Invisible but always tight. Always itching. And sometimes, when you look in the mirror, you see your reflection blink too late. Like something else is watching. Something still trapped. Some piece of you that never made it back. And that's the real truth no one tells you. You don't survive the war. You outlast it. One breath at a time. One ghost at a time. One morning where you pour your coffee and it doesn't taste like gunpowder. One moment where you laugh and it doesn't feel like betrayal. One day where you finally say their names out loud and it doesn't break you. It just reminds you they were real. You are too. Still here. Still breathing. Even if the mud never forgets. Even if the jungle still whispers your name. Even if you came home without ever really leaving.